told you about this, but I'll repeat it for the record. While in boot camp, I learned my first lesson about prejudice against Jews. You know, to me, I was aware of prejudice against black people because that was sort of common around our area. In fact, it seemed like Polish people, to some extent, had a more intense racial problem with black people than most, although I'm not sure about that. But because they could speak in a different language, they could voice their displeasure with these minorities. But we never heard much about Jews in our household, although I know my dad would call them, kikes. That was the common term for a Jew, and, the derisory term, if that's the right word for Jew. But it wasn't much, since we didn't know hardly any Jewish people, it wasn't a everyday occurrence at home. And frankly, I didn't know about the Holocaust that was going on in Germany. I mean, I was oblivious to it. Your mother tells me she was aware of it, but, at that time, but I wasn't until the episode at boot camp. Well, because of my inability to swim, not only did I go to the regular swimming classes, which was for 2 weeks, then in order to get me to try to teach me to swim, I had to go at night, which would be my normal time off, like from 7 to 8 or 8 to 9, whatever it was. I'd have to go to the natatorium, and there would be somebody there trying to teach me to swim. And I did that probably for 2 or 3 more weeks, that special training, which was sort of wasted on me. But one day when coming home from a swimming class, I encountered a huge bunch of people in the barracks surrounding a couple guys that were also part of our company. And I happened to know these 2 fellas, but never occurred to me that they were Jewish, even though one of their names was Saul Brandeman, and the other, I can't think of its name now, but Paul something or other. It didn't sound as Jewish as Saul Brandeman. But anyway, these guys in the barracks, who mostly were from Tennessee and some from Kentucky, and they were what I would describe, a lot of them were hillbilly people, couldn't read and write. They were rough-hewn guys. They had these 2 fellas, Saul and Paul, surrounded, and, they were having some sort of a argument with them and seemingly calling them names, although I can't remember. But when I came in, this is what I saw, and I couldn't understand what was going on. And in fact, I didn't realize till many months or years later that this was sort of a hostility towards the Jews, much like you would have expected in Germany. So anyway, I came through the crowd and, sort of elbowed my way through the ring of guys. It must have been 40 or 50 guys surrounding them. And I worked my way into the center and stood with them and, start listening to these comments and probably find out Paul's name eventually, but because I have a picture of him and Saul both in my scrapbook. But, I said, and I'm going back now, and the reason I got to know a lot of these people because of their situation. So many of them couldn't read or write, and I had developed a rapport with a lot of them by writing letters for them or reading letters from home that they got, and helping them frame new letters and to the folks back home for them. And so they sort of trusted me in essence, and they got to like me. And in fact, we all ended up being good friends by the time we graduated 8 weeks. But this was a very tense moment because I think they had this, when they were surrounding these 2 guys, they had this hostility that existed in Germany and all over our country a rough situation. And in fact, I thought it was going to become a melee, you know. And I told them, I said, you know, I singled out certain ones. I said, you know, I'm just going to say, Joe, how come you're doing this, you know? I said, if you're going to hurt Saul and Paul here, you're going to have to take me on too. And I says, who's going to write your letters for you? You know, who's going to read your mail? And you know, I went around the circle and naming guys that you know, I had been helping. I said, you know, there's nothing wrong with these guys. You know, they're in uniform just like we are. They serve. You know, they're putting their life on the line just like the rest of us. You know, they're no different just because they're Jewish, which I didn't even think about them being Jewish even with their names. I had gotten to know them to some degree before this encounter because both of them were from, not from South Bend, but had spent some time at Notre Dame in South Bend in what it was called either the V7 or V12 program. V12 program, your mom says, and it was a preparatory training course for Navy pilots. And they got washed out for some reason or other. And after they got washed out, they got drafted into the regular Navy, so they were just sailors like the rest of us, not officers. So we had, you know, gotten to know each other a little bit then, and after that incident, we got to know each other quite a bit better, and in fact traded photographs of ourselves, sort of as remembrances. And I have these photographs of them. But anyway, I don't, you know, my memory is dim as to what really happened, but it seemed like it ended up a lot of grumbling, and the crowd broke off, and you know, it was sort of forgotten. Everything got smoothed over, but that was sort of my first experience with prejudice and a form of racism, I guess, that existed, and I was, you know, not very knowledgeable about it at all, and didn't really think about it as being that until, as I said, many months or years later. And I don't know what I would have done if the fight started, because these were rough mountain men. I mean, the bony kind, you know, that could slash you open with just a knuckle or two. It was sort of an interesting experience. Well, in 8 weeks we graduated, and you know, went before marched our troops in seems like thousands and thousands of sailors marched in parade fashion before the reviewing officers. We graduated, and we split up to two different jobs. Most of the guys went to sea. And
how long did you spend there, did you say?
We were there 8 weeks. So this is a good place to stop if you want.
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. This has been a Connective Communication production.